All right, I watched Re-Animator. This is a member request from Jay, I guess because it's October, so he wanted to pick something in the more horror genre. And this one for me was not my thing. It was mostly just gross. I liked the idea and the premise, but they didn't really do much with it. But the bigger problem overall was that the characters just weren't likable, like none of them. I mean, maybe I'm the minority on this one. It's got a trilogy, I found out last night when I watched it. And you can tell it's very Frankenstein inspired, but it just doesn't really do much with it besides have the characters be retarded. And I can see why people like it. If you're into like the slasher, gory genre, then it makes sense why you'd enjoy it. By the end, the movie goes off the rails. There was one scene that I really liked that I thought was pretty clever, but mostly it's just kind of crazy. So let's just get into it. So we start off the movie with Dr. Gruber dying and his face is all swollen and shit. And you can see his apprentice, Herbert West, is the one who made him that way. Because they're like, oh, you killed him. And he's like, no, I gave him life. And that's your intro to the movie. And what you find out is that all these doctors specialize in like brain research. And maybe at the time this was like cutting edge. I have no idea. Or if this is all just total bullshit. No clue. But they talk about like where the will is located in the brain and stuff. Stuff that could be interesting if expounded on a little bit. So this guy, Dan Kane, is also in medical school. He's in the US. That last scene was in Switzerland. And he's frustrated because this patient died and he feels like they should keep going. And the doctor says, you have to know when enough is enough and just to accept it. So that's kind of the setup there for your character for the people who want to bring the dead back to life. So Dan's girlfriend that he's plowing here is Megan, and she's the daughter of the guy who's in charge of the program, the dean. They're looking for a roommate. So Herbert, who we saw in the opening scene, is at the door looking to live with them as she's leaving the house because her dad's very traditional. She can't spend the night, blah, blah, blah. And the whole movie, the way that he's portrayed is, I feel like even in the universe, you would think, wow, this guy is a fucking psycho. And this is part of what lends to the movie, I think, being not as fun or good as it could have been. He's essentially a complete lunatic, not very likable. What you're going to see as the movie goes on is Dan just kind of goes along with it, even though this guy is clearly deranged. So they talk a bit. Once Herbert sees the basement of this place, he's like, oh, this is perfect. And he wants to live with them. Megan is clearly uncomfortable and doesn't want this guy there because, like I said, it's obvious how fucking weird he is. But our main character is both a doctor and a retard. I guess those things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but would be nice if he hadn't gone full retard. So they're in class talking about their brain dead research, and the main antagonist, I guess, Dr. Carl Hill, says that the limit is 6 to 12 minutes. And Herbert, already the first time that he met him, said that his research was outdated and essentially a cheap copy of the guy that we saw die at the beginning of the movie. So then he's breaking a pencil while the guy's talking, and Dr. Carl Hill gets pissed off at him and kind of ends the class abruptly. Here's the doctor here. He gets pissed off and he's like, maybe you should get a pen. And essentially Herbert says, you're a fucking idiot. The 12-minute limit is bullshit. That's just what you think and it's outdated. Like brains can be brought back to life long after that is the implication. So this is Megan with her dad and the guy Carl. They're all friends. They're eating. And pretty much right away, it makes it apparent that Carl is attracted to Megan. He makes little jabs about Dan and how he's not someone the daughter should be dating. And this develops as the movie goes on to where he's a full-blown fucking weirdo and a pretty uncomfortable scene actually near the end. And this is where the movie starts to make the characters really just dumb and kind of unlikable to me. So his cat's dead and he's like, where the hell did he go? And they're looking around and Megan walks into Herbert's room and the fridge gets jostled open and the fucking cat's there in the fridge. And you can see the glowing green serum, which is his bring shit back to life serum. And he makes some bullshit excuse about how the cat suffocated itself to death. And he just couldn't get him a message. And it's like, if I came home and my fucking cat was dead, I'd beat my roommate's ass. And that'd be the end of it. Like, the dude's fucking weird. He's been there for like a day and your cat's dead. How can you not kick him out already? And this is kind of what makes Dan just seem like a fucking idiot for the rest of the movie. So later that night or the next night, whatever, Dan wakes up to some kind of meowling noise. And he's walking around with a bat and he's trying to wake Herbert up at his room, but it's locked. And he stumbles down to the basement where Herbert has a demon cat attacking him. And obviously the cat's going fucking crazy. Eventually, Dan throws it against the wall and breaks its back, re-killing it. This is where he says, oh, he was dead for hours, and my re-agent brings him back to life. And it still brought him back to life. And this is actually a neat scene, the way that it's shot, because they have one of those hanging lights over the center of the room, and it gets bumped when they're fighting this cat. So the lighting the whole time is swinging. And it's a lot of long shots. So you just get this swinging light, and they're chasing around this fucking demon cat trying to protect themselves. So then he re-injects it again while its back is broken, and it comes to life again. And instead of Dan being like, dude, get the fuck out, he's like all on board with it. Megan sees and flips her shit, and instead of being like, this guy needs to get the fuck out or I'm leaving your ass, she's just kind of freaking the fuck out. She just kind of panics and is like, what the hell are you guys doing? This is insane. So he goes and talks to Megan's dad, and Megan's dad's like, he's crazy, you're an idiot, he's not a student here anymore, fuck him, about Herbert. So Dan, because we're supposed to believe that he wants everyone to live, decides to sneak Herbert into the morgue so they can try it on a person. The reanimated person, just like the cat, freaks out. Megan's dad shows up, and Herbert's able to stop the corpse with like a bone saw through the back of its chest spine area. And then, of course, being the brainiacs that they are, they reanimate Megan's dad as well. But because they get to him faster, and the corpse had been in the morgue for hours, he's a little bit more borderline sentient. So they say that he just had a mental breakdown. Megan's like, what the hell is wrong with him? What did you guys do to him? And Dan just keeps fucking stuff up to befriend a lunatic. This is where we get some more really weird shit with Dr. Carl hitting on Megan. We see that he has like a bunch of photos of her and locks of hair and shit at one point. Just gross. So Dan tells her the truth, and obviously she wants to break up with him, at least until the end of the movie. Couldn't imagine staying with the fucking person who murdered my dad, but whatever, and then brought him back as a weird zombie corpse. So we find out that Megan's dad was lobotomized by Carl so that he can't talk. Carl goes over to Herbert's place, blackmails him because he's like, I know that he's dead. And he's like, you're going to give me your notes and research. Herbert freaks out, hits him in the back of the head with a shovel, and then cuts his head off with the shovel, and then injects the serum into his body and his head. So in the rest of the movie, I guess because he's so fresh, Carl is controlling his body and carrying around his own head. And like this kind of over-the-top stuff, I could see why you might find it appealing. But by this point, I was just so checked out because I'm like, all these characters are assholes that I just didn't give a shit. So Carl uses his corpse to sneak up on Herbert, knocks him out, and steals all of his shit so that he can become like King Zombie. Oh, man. And you know, something that's usually interesting with this kind of stuff is very often the message of the thing will be, you have to let your loved ones go. It was their time to move on. Even if you bring them back, they're not the same. They're deformed. Something along those lines. This movie just goes balls deep into fuck it. We're bringing people back and don't give a fuck. So this is where they figure out the lobotomy and the weird pictures. And Dan realizes that Megan's in trouble from Carl. He rushes home and Herbert is just waking up. And he's like, oh shit, we need to go. Now that Carl's a headless guy carrying a head, he's taking control of Megan's dad and the other corpses, and he's boss zombie. Dan goes to apologize to Megan. And he's like, you know, you should just go be happy elsewhere. Essentially, he's not even trying to get forgiveness because he fucked up. And she's going to forgive him anyway because she can fix him or some shit. I don't know. And the corpse dad shows up, beats his ass, and then takes Megan to the morgue where all this shit happens so that Carl can finally be with her. This scene is super over the top and pretty uncomfortable to watch. His body is using his head because Megan's strapped down to the table and they ripped her clothes off. And he's like shoving his tongue down her throat and sucking on her nipples and shit. And they show it all. You see a full bush and everything. I mean, we got that he was the bad guy. Could have gone without that. Maybe they need to make the movie a little bit longer because it's only like an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know. So this is my favorite part of the movie. Herbert and Dan go to get Megan. Herbert's supposed to distract Carl while Dan sneaks Megan out of the lab. And Herbert's like, yeah, I have a plan. And Carl's like, so do I. And when he says, so do I, all the corpses sit up at the same time. So I like that. That was a nice twist there that they were trying to use bait and then he had already taken over all the corpses trying to think ahead. Probably the only smart thing in the whole fucking movie. And then from here on out, it's just like a mad scramble between the corpses and Herbert and Dan and Megan. Herbert does like a double maximum dose into Carl's body and the organs shoot out and wrap around him. There's corpses all over the place fighting. Eventually, Megan's dad has some semblance of his self left, grabs Carl's head and squeezes it to death. It's really chaotic. And I was just like, what the fuck is happening right now? Dan and Megan are fleeing. Herbert throws his bag of notes to Dan, even though he's about to die. Of course, he's not actually dead because there's 2 more movies, but didn't know that going in. He uses an axe to cut off the corpse's hand that's choking Megan. Her trachea is crushed and she dies. He injects her and the movie ends. And this is kind of what I was talking about, where it's like there is no real morality to this movie or like lesson or kind of philosophical, interesting things going on. It's just a very straightforward, very simple kind of gore fest with characters that I find generally unappealing. Megan's okay, I guess. Still kind of an idiot. But yeah, that was Re-Animator, the first horror genre movie I did for October. A little bit late on that one. Jay, I'm going to have to ask you to come back onto the rails here with these last two. The new killer movie with Miss Sanday and this one didn't do it for me. But it's your member request, so you can do whatever you want. All right, well, if you guys have seen this movie, let me know what you think. I don't really have much else to say about it. It was an interesting premise that didn't do anything with it. I can see why it has the following that it does. If you look at Rotten Tomatoes or whatever, the audience loves it. Just not my thing. But, you know, the point of these member requests is to make me branch out and watch shit that I haven't seen. So, whatever. All right. Well, if you're still here, like and subscribe and all that shit. Thanks. See ya.